The machines are coming. They are coming at an absolute rapid rate. They are gobbling up a whole bunch of certain tasks and making businesses a lot more efficient and more lean. And your competition is embracing this technology. And I think the landscape that we see in small business in 3 years' time is going to look very different to what it does today.
I'm pleased to welcome today's guest, David Jenyns. He's a fellow entrepreneur who fired himself, hired a CEO, moved to the beach, and tripled his bottom line. I think that's something that every entrepreneur would like to do. Before we get into that, let me share his introductions. David Jenyns is an experienced entrepreneur who sold the Melbourne cricket ground in his early 20s and founded Melbourne SEO Services. He systematized himself out of that business in 2016 and founded SYSTEMology to help business owners implement systems to scale their businesses. Today, he supports a growing community of certified systemologists, delivers workshops, keynote addresses, hosts a podcast, and is on a mission to free business owners worldwide from daily operations. David, let's start with your backstory. How did you get
Yeah.
into entrepreneurship?
My dad was always a home business kind of guy, and he always had something on the go, whether it was multi-level marketing, fixing computers, importing different products. He tried lots of different things. So I feel like it was in my DNA, just seeing my dad do a lot of things. But I also saw him jump from opportunity to opportunity and was a big dreamer and never really went deep on anything. So that memory always really stuck with me also, where I thought, oh, yeah, look, I've got that business gene in me, but I also appreciate it and know how important it is to grab something and then follow it through and go really deep on it to get to the actual reward.
And so were you working as an employee or what was your background? Did you have odd jobs? How did you get into business?
Yeah. So when I left school, that was back in 99, I knew straight away that I wanted to be a business owner and I really wanted to go where the money is and start to make money. So I went to a school where probably about 99% of people went to university after that particular school. And I was the rare exception that said, no, you know what? I'm just going to go out and get to it. And then I tried a bunch of different things for a period there. When I was at school, I was working in a supermarket stacking shelves, just dreaming big dreams on things that I could do. And then after that, I started off in the stock market education space. I got a job doing a little bit of work there. And then I worked in a stockbroking firm because, again, I thought go where the money is, and the money's on the stock market. So, but then I realized, hey, you need to have money to make money and to be able to invest. So that's when I switched gears and really became interested in business. And I created a product in the stock market education space, educating people on a particular software package and how to use it because I was quite good with the software. And that was my first business. And then after that, tried a lot of different things, importing products, some online like affiliate programs, and then I even became a partner in a rock and roll clothing music store, which was modeled off Hot Topic out of the States. We were trying to bring that into Australia, and we grew that to 3 stores. And I became heavily involved in the market education space. So I had a few things all going on at once. And then after the stock market education space, my business partner went in a different direction. We closed that down. I took the team and launched the digital agency, and I ran that for 13 years. And it was that business that, towards the end of that, when I birthed the Systemology and System Hub idea after working heavily in that business.
Tell me more about the digital agency because that could mean a lot of things. What were you doing in that?
So this was early days search engine optimization before it was even a thing. So early 2000s, I was really deep into internet marketing and understanding how that worked and how you would do keyword selection and put the keyword all over the page and help small businesses get their business coming up in Google Maps. Once that ended up launching, it was all about helping local businesses build up their online presence in their local area. And we ended up launching a sister company to that, which was for video marketing because we were really great at doing video. So we had Melbourne Video Production also, and we were creating videos for small businesses and again, very early days launch of YouTube. So we did quite a few things. There's a little bit of pay per click in there, a little bit of SEO, and it was just at that time the heyday of internet marketing where you could put $1 in and you'd get $10 back. The game is very different these days, but it was a great time to be involved in digital marketing at that point.
And were you making money at that point?
Yeah, we had a great team. We had about 15 of us. We're half based in Melbourne, half based in the Philippines for the other half of the team, working ridiculous hours but making great money. So from the outside looking in, I launched my first book, Authority Content. I was getting a lot of speaking engagements, but really was a case of looking great from the outside, but the cost of getting the business to where it was very high. Extremely long hours, burning that candle at both ends, constantly getting pulled in every which way. But I was younger at that time, so it was easier to really lean into it, but it was on an unsustainable path.
So from the outside looking in, from the outside, it looks like everything's okay, but underneath it's a poop show.
Just very stressful, and sometimes like you got the cool, calm, collected duck on top of the water, but the feet underneath are just going like this, and everything the way that we present to clients and all those sorts of things. But it was, I mean, just bringing together a virtual team and getting them all swimming in the same direction, and whenever there was problems getting escalated to me. And in many regards, like I was systemology, when I launched that business, it was to write the book that I wish I had when I was in that time. It was to solve my own problems. After I learnt a lot of things, I was like, ooh, there's just many different ways that I could have done things better. Well, let's capture that and then try and use that to pass on some of the lessons I gained.
So you were solving your own problem and it ended up solving a lot of problems for other people.
Yes, that's right. So it started off with the System Hub software because we were storing our processes in Dropbox, and then we moved it to Google Cloud, and things were scattered everywhere, and it wasn't clear how things were done, and we were a little bit systems driven, but it just at the time didn't have somewhere where we're just like, oh, where do we store our SOPs and how do we keep this organized and clear? And then I thought, well, this is a problem I see a lot of my clients have in the digital agency. I knew that a lot of them equally struggled with systems and process. So I set our sights on that. We developed the software initially for the digital agency, and we got that into place. And then we realized, hang on, others need this. And then we started to sell it outside. And then after a year or two after that, I realized, hang on, the software doesn't solve the problems. It's really not about the software. It's more about the implementation and how you build up a systems culture. And that's when we birthed systemology, which is more the thinking of how do you build a systems culture, which complements the software and it helps with making sure that these changes that you make stick.
So when you were working all these hours, were you married at that time?
I was dating, and then, yes, towards the end, we got married. Probably I'd been in the business about 9 years when we got married, and I was juggling quite a bit at that time. And then once we got married, that's when kind of things changed in my head because I look back to my dad, who I referenced a little bit earlier. He was always working, not a very present dad. He was constantly something going on. He'd be staying up until 3 in the morning and then sleeping in the morning. And I just remember the amount of hours that he worked. And I thought, oh, I don't want to be that type of dad. I want to be a much more present dad. And then shortly after we got married, we found out we were pregnant. And that's when I was like, okay, something needs to change here. I know it is possible to build a business that is a profitable enterprise that works without you. I just need to figure out how that's done.
how did you figure out that you needed to design systems? And I'm going to pause for a second in case our listeners don't know what a system is. I've read a lot of business books. They all say you need to build a system. You need to systematize your business. But briefly, tell me what a system is. And then how did you get the idea that you needed to start going down this path?
Yeah. When I give the definition for systems, I lump a whole lot of terms under the one heading systems, because people might call them SOPs, standard operating procedures, how-to documents, work instructions, workflow diagrams, step by steps, like all of these. I just put it under one big lump of systems, and the definition I give it is it's a series of steps that, when followed, produce a consistent outcome. And the reason I like that as a definition is it works on the micro level, but it also works on the macro level. At micro level, you could go right down to a step-by-step instruction on how an invoice is sent out via QuickBooks. Okay, that's a system. But it could also work at the macro level, which might be, what is the high level system that is followed to deliver your core product or service? And maybe it's got key milestones, and there are sub systems that sit underneath that. So again, a system for me is just a series of steps that, when followed, produce a consistent outcome. And I find that's actually, some people get overwhelmed by the idea of systems and processes because of all of these terms, and they actually do have definitions, and there is subtleties and differences, a little bit like the Inuits. If you and I talk about snow, we say, okay, there's snow and maybe there's sleet. There's two. You talk to an Inuit and they've probably got 50 different types of snow because they're in it and they think about it. So I just chunk it all the way up to say, this is snow. So that's the way I think about what a system is. Just like maybe business was in my DNA, maybe systems was in my DNA also. My dad was actually a systems engineer by trade before he started all of his own business stuff. So he always had a bit of the systems in his brain. And I remember one of the first systems I ever saw was one that my dad put together for my brother and I, which he called the sheet. And this was a 3-page document that Chris and I, when I was 8 years old, would complete to get pocket money. And we'd basically earn points for different activities: cleaning your room, being good to your brother, cleaning out the bird cage, doing the dishes. And throughout the week, we would basically add up all of the points for us doing all of these different activities. And then at the end of the week, he had like a tally at the end, and then a scoring legend where, depending on how many points you got, would determine how much pocket money you got. The more points, the more pocket money. And then he even had things like, if you get 3 weeks of more than 200 points, you get a bonus payout of an extra couple of bucks. So he really gamified this, and that was the first system I ever saw. And then I realized after that, even looking back now, every business I've been involved in, there was some element of systems and processes in there. The rock and roll clothing music store, we were looking to franchise, and we franchised the first store, which means we need to have a head office manual and we needed to have a store manual. When I did the stock market education space, it was all about trading plans, which is to decide up front how you're going to enter, how are you going to position size, how are you going to exit, and having rules around that to try and take out some of the emotion in trading. Even in the digital agency, we had checklists and processes for certain elements. It wasn't completely dialed in, but it was there. So I just realized that it's always been there. I just started to, as I've gotten older and been more involved in business, started to elevate its importance. I always thought it was important, but it was never urgent. And a busy business owner never gets to those items. They're always too busy. But now I'm starting to recognize, especially with everything that's going on with AI, it is now important and urgent to get very clear on what your core tasks are. Because even with like the AI, you're not going to be able to tell the AI what to do and program it and direct it unless you're very clear on what you want it to do. So I feel like there's never been an easier time to systemize. There's never been a more important time to systemize. And I've now had the good fortune through my work to see into literally thousands of businesses And the difference between those that have process and those that don't, it's night and day. Those that actually build a systems culture, you just can't measure the two businesses. They operate in completely different paradigms. So that's where I've really gotten bitten by this bug. And I feel like it's the best kept secret for small business. And I'm doing my best to share it with small business landscape and small business owners because of the impact I know it can have.
Yeah, and I think it's something else that most entrepreneurs may not realize. If they're looking to exit their business and it's not systematized, if it's not documented, the valuation is way less than it is if you have a system in place and anybody can come in and run that system. Do
Yeah.
you think there's certain industries that maybe shouldn't systematize, or based on your viewpoint, do you think basically anybody could do this? For example, the government. That's one that I've not really considered, but are there government agencies that could benefit from systematization?
Yeah. So I had the good fortune, I talk about it in the book. I had the good fortune of working with Michael Gerber, like a series of fortuitous events happened that basically served up Michael Gerber, who I consider the godfather of small business systems. He wrote the book The E-Myth, and I got to work on a dream project with him, and then he wrote the forward to the book. And when I sent him a preview copy, we were talking about that, what is the definition of systemology? And I had my definition initially, and it's right at the start of the book. And together we worked on it and rebuilt it. And it is the systematic study of organizational effectiveness through observation and experiment. Now, the bit I want to narrow in here is initially I was focusing in on small business. And Michael Gerber said, no, you're missing it here. This is organizational effectiveness that we're talking about, which means it works in all organizations, for profit, not for profit, government, because all I'm really talking about is identifying what best practice is and making it repeatable and putting it in a central location where we have a way of doing things. So, in that way, yes, it would work just as well for government. It's about starting off thinking the 80/20. What are the most important systems that deliver the bulk of the result in that particular organization? And let's create a standard for the way that those tasks are complete.
Yeah. I remember years ago reading Michael Gerber's book. I got super excited, super jazzed up. I'm ready to go conquer the world and start doing this. And I tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed, and it never worked. And so then I went and took Sam Carpenter's class. He has Work the System. It's another great book, but in
Yeah.
theory, and so I even went to one of his seminars and I could never make it work. And the next thing I tried was Process Street. And we're a family owned business. And so it's my wife and daughter and I working on this. And I would try to implement it. And they're like, this is too complicated. I'm like, no, we have to be systems oriented. And it never worked. And then all of a sudden, your product System Hub came along and I tried it. And it was like the lights went on and it went from being really hard to being really easy. And now my daughter came to me the other day and she said, Dad, I've created 7 videos in System Hub. This thing is absolutely amazing. So there's a plug for you. It is truly great. I think Paul Akers from 2 Second Lean, if you've ever read his book, one of the things that he talks about is that when you are doing something good, you know that it's effective when you want to do it at home. And I can tell you that I have the paramedic training business and this podcast, but and so I have System Hub for both of those. And the next thing I'm actually looking at is personalizing creating a home operations manual so that we can have people come in and help us. Have you heard of people doing that?
I have had a couple come along, and I love when I chat with fellow systems people. And it's funny, I just like Michael Gerber to a certain extent. What was surprising when I worked with Michael is how not a systems person he is. You would expect that he is the systems guy, and it was so not expected for me that he is a big picture dreamer type of guy. What he's done is he's recognized how important systems and processes are. So he's surrounded himself with all of the people who help where he is not strong, as in they are rock solid, and he leads and teaches about systems and processes, but he doesn't like getting in there and doing the documentation. And that for me was like a little bit of a, hey, this is okay. Because my wife is actually the systems person. And in our family, everything's organized and systems, and she takes it to the next level. She's got checklists for Christmas. She's got checklists for when we go camping. She's got checklists for this and that. And sometimes if I don't follow her process, she goes, hang on, you teach about systems. This is so hypocritical, Dave. You need to be following systems. So I love systems at home. And one thing I realized is some people it comes very naturally to, and others it doesn't. If I go back to the sheet that I talked about with my brother that my dad put into place, my brother hated the sheet. He didn't follow the sheet. He didn't get pocket money. He just did not participate because he didn't like following the system or being involved. Whereas I was the opposite, actually. I loved following it. I figured out how to get maximum pocket money. And so everybody's a little bit different. I think in business, like it's a bit different when you're at home you can't really select your family. They are who they are. But in business, you can select who you work with as a business owner. So just make sure that you select systems people and it'll actually make everything go easier. One of our head systemologists, Rob Morgan, from our certification part of the business, he loves doing systems and he's applied it all through his home and thinking about how he does everything. So, yeah, I hear different stories from different people but I think once you see the value of them, like it's undeniable. It's like I said, you're just figuring out what works and you're making it repeatable. So you don't have to keep doing the same thing. Every time I go traveling, I've got a travel checklist. So I just look at a checklist of when I'm packing my bag. So I remember my charger and remember my noise canceling headphones and I don't have to think about it. And then I can think about other things. Like checklists help you create space in your brain because all of the basic stuff gets handled. And that's the real key. Like, and maybe one of those counterintuitive truths about systems that they actually free you up. They don't do the opposite, where a lot of people they think they create rigidity.
Yeah. I'm going to go down in a rabbit hole here for just a little bit, but I know every time I travel, I have the same checklist. If I'm going to the beach, there's a checklist, but I have to keep recreating it on my phone. If we're going up to Alaska, there's another checklist. And I really wish that somebody would create a recurring checklist so that I can go through it. This month we're going here and here's my checklist. So anyway, I'll get out of that rabbit hole. You mentioned something that's really true, that a lot of creative type people think that everything's going to be very rigid and regimented in a system hub type setting. So what do you say to those people? Like, how would you encourage them to start, or why should they do it?
Yeah, I equally thought that for a period, even with my background in systems. But I had this realization in that video production business that I was talking about which is a very creative business. I mean, making movies, it's just art and videos for businesses. So I had my lead videographer, Adrian, and we went on a shoot one day because his assistant couldn't make it with him. So I went with him and I remember the first time I hopped in the car with him, we had about an hour drive from the studio and we spent the entire car ride talking about, did I pack the spare battery? I hope I got the extra lens. Did we email the client to make sure that they shouldn't wear checkered shirts because that doesn't look very good on screen? Oh, do we get that consent form? Like we spent 60 minutes talking about stuff that just should have been handled. At the end of that shoot, I said to him, look, we got to put a pre-shoot checklist in place. You do it the night before, you do it in the studio, you make sure you're all packed up so you're ready to go. So we put that in place when we got back. About 6 months later, I go on another shoot with him. And the car ride experience was completely different. We were talking about the framing that he wanted to get and the emotions that he wanted the film to create. What ended up happening is we actually created space for the creativity. Basically, you systemized everything around the creativity that has to happen to a particular way. And then that creates the space for the creativity. And it's almost like if you crowd your brain out, you don't get the good ideas. I've just recently had another experience and I've thought about it a bit. You know, when we sit there and we're on our phones and we're scrolling through social media in some of our downtime, and you're just filling it up with this needless noise, you're actually crowding out in your brain the space that normally would be filled with coming up with ideas And because you're distracting yourself by listening to a podcast or whatever it is. And it made me realize it's that space when the magic comes out. So you actually need to figure out how to create the space. That's typically where you'll get your biggest insight.
That's a really great analogy. I love that. Another one that I can think of is when you look at music and you look at notes playing on, like I play the drums, so it's beat, beat, beat. There's a space in between beat and beat. But nowadays, all we do is it's like, brrrr, and
Yeah.
we never have that little bit of beat, beat, and
Yeah.
that gap, that little space in between. So that's really interesting. So in the introduction, I mentioned that you basically retired to a beach and then things got even better for you. Can you tell me that
Yeah.
story?
Yeah. So the digital agency, in the last few years of that business, when we found out we were pregnant and I got married, we ended up moving down the coast on a place called the Mornington Peninsula down here in Melbourne, Australia. And I knew I had a deadline because the baby was going to be due in 9 months. And then I thought, right, I really need to focus on making sure that I get myself out of this day to day because I don't want to be that type of dad. And then I slowly started extracting myself out. And as I said, I already had a feeling that systems were the way. I identified someone in the team that I wanted to groom up into that CEO role so I could step back because I wanted to take some time off when the baby arrived. And I really leaned into it. Took us a little bit longer. It was probably closer to probably 12 to 15 months of really focused systemizing, delegating down to other team members, skilling up my right hand lady at the time, Melissa. And then she ended up taking over and running that business. She did a better job than I did. I ended up taking 12 months off to really spend time with the family, reevaluated where I was at. I mean, I would meet with her basically every month and get her to give me a little bit of an update on how the business was traveling. That's when I actually fell out of love with the digital agency work. And I realized I don't really enjoy that work anymore like I once did, the passion that I used to have for it. And that's when I thought maybe I need to do something different. And we had this little side business System Hub that was bubbling along. And then that was the point at which Systemology was birthed. That's when Michael Gerber reached out. Like I just stepped out of running the business and I had some downtime and was having the year off. And that's why I actually was in a situation where I thought, you know what, I can do this project with Michael because I didn't have other stuff that was on the go. And so I followed that opportunity, which was extraordinary. And as the business continued, I didn't actually step back into the digital agency. Melissa ran that for another 3 years after that. And this speaks to something that you said earlier about systems add value to the business. Like I wasn't planning on selling that business. I thought this is working well for me. It's putting money in my bank account. Melissa's running it. I just check in every month and we have our management meetings. And then she had change in circumstances with her family, which most of her family was in the States. She actually needed to move back to the States, so she resigned from the position. And then that's when I was like, oh, I don't really want to step back into this business. And then I needed to make a choice. I decided to sell that business. I had a guy up in Cairns who bought the business off me, and he said he primarily bought it for the systems because I could say I'd not worked in this business for 3 years. It was under management, and which dramatically lowered the risk for him because he knew it wasn't dependent on me. It was really process driven. And that also was like just a big moment for me. That's actually when I doubled down on systemology and really lent in and said, you know what? This is my thing. Like I can see the vast majority of business owners don't get to the point where the business works without them. And an even smaller percentage of them actually ever get to a point where they get an exit. So how can I really refine this system? And that's when I just went, you know what? This is my mission. I'm going to help other business owners do this.
And so now you're going deep on that, like you referring back to what your dad didn't do. He was like a drill bit that keeps going around to
Yeah.
different pieces in the metal and never really goes deep to get the benefit of that underneath.
Yeah, so I've now been, and I probably should jump on LinkedIn to double check the hours. Probably been working on this problem, if you include the System Hub part, probably for, look, the better part of 8 years. And
Mhm.
it's the same problem that I'm working on. I'm continually refining it. just recently, and I've been working on this for ages, I've just had another really big breakthrough. And the big breakthrough is this idea of the systems champion. And I've been talking more and more about this because I feel it is the linchpin for making this work. This is the systems champion is the right hand man or woman that helps the business owner build a systems culture inside the organization. It's the person who keeps it front and center and ensures that you're continually moving forward. Because as I said, the business owner is always working on highly important, highly urgent stuff. What's burning? Usually that's grabbing the attention. So having a systems champion that continually moves it forward, I realized I've done some analysis of out of all of the successful companies I've worked with, all of the ones that have had standout breakout success have identified this person and empowered that person up. So I've been doing a lot of work on that, on how do you find that person? How do you identify them? How do you empower them? What tools do you give them? How do you train them? What is it that they actually do? And that for me, like, again, I'm just constantly focusing in on this problem for 8 years, going really deep to solve it better than anyone else. Because, like you, I read the E Myth. I got all excited by it. I thought, I want to do this. Yes. And I feel like that's what Gerber's contribution to the small business community was to go, business systems are important. And now I think it's indisputable. I don't think I've ever spoken with a business owner where we don't agree that they're important. We all know that systems driven businesses are just better businesses. They deliver better outcomes for clients, for business owners, for suppliers, for staff. They're just better businesses. So then the question is, okay, well, if they're better and we want to do this, how do we do it? And that's where I've gone to work now, which is, okay, and how are we going to do this? So it's almost like you were talking about with your daughter. Your daughter is your systems champion. So what you want to empower her and give her everything so she keeps moving it forward. And oftentimes that systems champion will become the most knowledgeable team member in your business because they understand different aspects and different departments and what's happening. And I almost feel now it's a gift to give someone the role of the systems champion because it's almost like you're teaching them what it takes to become a business owner rather than just knowing how to do the technical work, which Michael Gerber talks about. We're talking what are all of the things outside of that required to run a business that delivers the technical work. And the systems champion gets the visibility on that. So if we pick that person wisely, they can run your business. And we're also effectively training future business leaders on how to run successful businesses.
Yeah, I think you really understand what the gears are that operate your business. And I can tell you that when you document it, it's sometimes nebulous and we talk about it and you may have something in writing, but when you pin it down and put it in System Hub, it's absolutely amazing the power that comes from that. I think to your point about it shouldn't be the CEO because the CEO is usually the bottleneck of documenting systems. It goes back to me to the old Batman and Robin comics. You have two very different personality types. And if you're familiar with the disc profile, even if you're not, you have a dominant personality, the high D of the situation. Simon Cowell is a high D. And then you have the S of the equation, which is the steadiness type person. And so if you're familiar with Susan Boyle, and so imagine Simon saying, this is what we're going to do. And Susan Boyle with her great voice coming around and documenting it. That may not be a great example, but the point is that the CEO should not be the one who's documenting this. It really needs to be somebody else.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like a big part of what the business owner wants is for the business to run independently of them. So it's actually the best way for someone else to learn how it's done, to go through that documentation process. You show me what's getting done. I'll record it getting done and watch what you do. And then from that, I'll develop the checklist and the process and whatever, which is the step to actually delegate it off or hand it off to someone else because you set a standard. That's oftentimes one of the big challenges that business owners have. They're always worried that things won't be done to their standard. And that's why they always insert themselves in and want to get things done. The way to you can't hold someone to a standard unless you've clearly communicated what that standard is. The system and the process is a way of saying this is the standard. And then it's much easier to hold someone to an account because they can't say, oh, but I didn't know how, or I didn't know that was my responsibility, which are just oftentimes the excuses that come up. And we want to actually squash those excuses.
Yeah, what you're doing is making the invisible visible, and
Yeah.
then it divides it into, do we have a people problem or a systems problem? A people problem is if somebody can't get up because their alarm clock didn't go off or their cell phone went dead, right? That's a people problem. But a systems problem is they were there on time, they did something, we did not get the predictable, consistent result that we expect, and then you look at the system and you say, did you follow the system? Yes or no? Okay. If they didn't, well, that's a different problem. But if they followed it and they got a result, but it wasn't the result you intended, then now you can take it and you can tweak it, you can massage it, and you can say, let's do it different this time. And there's an order to it. And System Hub is the how of things. That's the
Yep.
simplest way I describe it to our team. It's the how we do things. So it puts it in one place. That's our center point, and everything revolves around our systems. So
Yes. Yeah. I love the way that you explain that. And as you explain that, makes me realize how deeply you understand this. Like I even with the language and the wording and the way that you explain it and talking about going from invisible to visible. Like that's all we're doing. Like I see systems as effectively documented habits. A habit you just do and you do automatically without thinking and it's that conscious competence and we're capturing that, we're documenting it, we're making the invisible visible so that it can be taught and transferred. Then someone does it, and then they initially it's they're consciously incompetent, but once they got a process, they can be consciously competent by following the process till the point at which it becomes their habit. And then that's the way that they do things. So a few of the things that you said there just made me go, you know what, Matt's got it.
I do. And you're not kicking new employees into the deep end because all of us have been either an employee or even as an employer. We kick somebody in and we say, welcome to the job. Here's the keys. Here's whatever it is, and go. And, or I spend an hour talking and I say, here's how we do this and this. And they go, oh, I got it. And the next day they don't. But you don't want to embarrass them and make them feel stupid. That's not a great welcome to our agency, right? Or our organization. So instead, you say, here's System Hub. Here's how we do it. And by the way, you're going to be documenting some of these in the future so that the next person who comes on board doesn't feel helpless. And
Yeah.
waterboarding is not, or drowning is not the best onboarding.
Onboarding is such a critical piece to making this work that most business owners miss. Again, you just kind of showing that you've got this. The reason it is so important is for a couple of things. One, a lot of onboarding, 2 or 3 weeks, a month goes by, they're training, the person's not really doing anything, they're not really adding any value to the business. It's in one ear, out the other. You get systems in place, you can shorten the time to which they are productively adding value to your business. Give them a nice, easy underarm task that's well documented, and you say, here, follow this. And within the first week of them starting, they're doing something and feeling valuable and adding value to the business, which is an infinitely better way for someone to learn. And we see it, especially in the trades businesses, where if you make a mistake, it can be costly and you can even get hurt. And sometimes junior apprentices, they if they're shown how to do something once, they don't want to ask the question, should I, if they've forgotten because they don't want to appear stupid or they weren't listening, but that can
Mhm.
end up in either a costly or even a deadly mistake. The idea of having a process somewhere where there's knowledge that they can go back to and revisit a process to get questions answered helps to empower them. So that's one piece. The other piece for onboarding that's critical is around setting the standard. They ran some psychology test. It was like in the 1970s where they had a whole bunch of actors standing in an elevator facing the wrong way. And then they had someone walk into that elevator and they, what's going on here? And then they turned and faced the wrong way also because people just want to fit in with what's going on. And you want to think about that with regards to your onboarding process. And what you're really trying to do is have everybody pointing in the direction in your business of this is how we do things here. So when the team member steps in, they go, oh shit, oh yeah, I'll point that way and I'll just do what everybody else is doing because no one wants to stick out. That's the way that you hit the ground running and the way that you from day dot, you don't allow bad habits to creep in. So it's a huge opportunity that most business owners miss. It's really critical to do your recruitment and your onboarding right. I think most business owners, small business owners, don't appreciate how important that is.
So we just have a few minutes left. So I've got just maybe one or two more questions for you. This all sounds really great, but I know that sometimes people have some hesitation about it. Employees feel like if I document my systems, you're going to fire me. And even with AI, that may be even more so. And then the other question is if you systematize your entire business and you no longer need to be there, what's that like? What are the new problems that come up? So
Mm,
either one of those questions is
yeah. Look, I reckon we could probably tackle both. I think for the staff, it's about building the right culture and the idea and helping team members to know the way you move up in our organization is to delegate down. So you capture what you're currently doing, you document it, you systemize it, you delegate it down to typically a less skilled, lower cost team member and maybe even robots at some point in time. And that doesn't make you less valuable. That actually makes you more valuable because the highest level thinkers in your business should be working on the highest value problems. Things that don't yet have a system solution, haven't yet got the way figured out just yet. And they're the ones we want those team members working on. So we really want to encourage team members to know that this will only add value and make you more valuable to the organization. So that's probably the first one. As far as completely systemizing yourself out of business, I've only ever really done that in the digital agency, and that was when I'd had enough and I'd fallen out of love with the business. For businesses that you still enjoy, let's say as a business owner, all that systemization does is allows you to level up the quality of the problem that you're working on. Like in business, there's always a challenge. There's always something to do. There's always like you're always going to be thinking about the next thing, the next leg up. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? What systemization allows is stops you focusing in on small, trivial, recurring problems that you've probably solved thousands of times before. And it's just part of the general operation. Instead of solving the same problem again and again, solve it once, install a system, delegate it down, move on to the next problem. Business is just a game of solving problems and challenges. There is a point where you go, ooh, there's less chaos. This is a more relaxed business. I'm seeing better growth. I feel more comfortable in this business. It's delivering better outcomes for everybody. But that doesn't necessarily mean the problems disappear. It's just different problems.
sure. I don't think I asked you how you tripled your business. So you
Yeah.
retired at the beach, and then how did you end up tripling your business not being there? Because
That
Melissa was
was
running it?
Yeah, it was a
Okay.
combination of having the right person in the right place and then having a systems culture. What I didn't realize, like I thought I was really good at a bunch of things that stepping away, like you sometimes can't see the forest for the trees and you're in the thick of it. And then I stepped away and then I realized there's certain things I wasn't great at. Like I was definitely spreading myself too thin, which meant I was the limiting factor or the bottleneck in certain
Mhm.
things, which meant it could only grow so high. By stepping back, it was easier for Melissa to go, well, I can plug a person in for that. I can get someone doing that, which then meant the business's capacity opened up, which then meant it was able to grow. It was a combination, though. It was not only the business growing sort of top line, but also we became a lot more efficient. And through the systems approach, we were able to get more done with less, which basically meant we saw money dropping to the bottom line. So that's why I said I didn't originally have any plans to sell that business because it was a great little business. But it's a combination. I mean, I still feel like systems and processes are the most important asset in the business because you own it, but also having the right people is key. You still want to have the right people running those systems. So it's a combination of both, but you don't own the people. That's why I say the most important asset you own are the systems, because people can come and go. Like I couldn't stop Melissa, nor would I want to when she wanted to go do her family stuff. I had to support it. But if we hadn't systemized that, half of the brain would have left that business. But she was a very systems driven person. So we had collected and built up all of that IP.
Yeah. And even in our business, our daughter someday will take over the business if she wants to. But by adding the systems focus, if she wants to go and get pregnant and have a kid, she can. And she's not like, well, I know everything. And if I leave, the business is going to crater. That doesn't happen once it's documented. So it really is the system stays, the people come and go. That's great.
Yeah, I love it.
What haven't I asked you that I should have asked you?
Probably the only thing which is just so pressing on my mind at the moment is the impact that AI is having on this space and what's it going to mean for small business. I don't think business owners fully appreciate the urgency right now about there's never been a better time to systemize. There's also never been a more important time to systemize because the machines are coming. They are coming at an absolute rapid rate. They are gobbling up a whole bunch of certain tasks and making businesses a lot more efficient and more lean. And your competition is embracing this technology. And I think the landscape that we see in small business in 3 years' time is going to look very different to what it does today. And there's a lag time between recognizing it, understanding it, learning it, getting it into place, getting the team on board, getting people comfortable. All of this takes time. So you want to start this now and get very clear on what your core processes are because where a lot of people go wrong with AI is it's like a bright, shiny objects, and they're going, "Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I'm not already doing this," and they're just jumping from things to things because oh wow, I can create this cool graphic using this particular prompt when it's really adding no value into the business. The question to ask is, what are my core tasks in the business, and how can AI help me do it faster, cheaper, and better? What am I already doing that I can do faster, cheaper, better? If you do that, then the money drops straight to the bottom line. That's the way to think about AI. I think people need to really elevate their focus on this and get their head around it. I actually make the case that the systems champion is perhaps the most well-positioned person in the organization to become your AI champion because they understand deeply what's going on. And if you pick it right, just like your daughter, if they're younger and more comfortable with technology, it'll be easier for them to adopt this and come up with ideas and rewrite process and say, you know what? On step number 3 of this process, let's now use this prompt, jump over to ChatGPT and plug this in here and draft the process, then come back or draft this email response, then come back to the process and continue. And now they might have saved 15 minutes on that first process just by a minor tweak in the process that then becomes your way now that everybody does it that way. Yeah, that's probably the one area we didn't touch on that I think we probably should have.
And that's one thing that we've been doing is if I don't have a process written, I can have Chat GPT or Grok or whatever you're using write the process steps 1 through 7, and then you could go through and look at it and see, is it correct? And if not, it's very easy to tweak. I heard recently that AI is not going to take over the world. It's people using AI. And it's like
Yeah.
a tool in your toolbox, a wrench, a screwdriver, whatever it is. That screwdriver can't tighten a screw by itself. It needs somebody to operate it. And so does AI, at least right now. Maybe we could get dystopian and talk about how scary it could be. But as of right now, it's people running AI that is going to change the world.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that when I type things into ChatGPT, if you know what good looks like, and then you see the output from one of these LLMs, and you go, oh, that's not right. Can we rework this? And you can continue to prompt backwards and forwards. It magnifies smart people and their output. If you're not smart or you don't understand the thing, AI isn't going to save you because it just loves to make stuff up or spit out garbage. And if you don't know, it does it in a really convincing way, and you'll just go, oh yeah, okay, I'll just go with that. So I think this idea of it accelerating people is a great way to think of it, like an Iron Man suit. It just makes you operate better.
I really like that analogy. It either makes you smarter or it amplifies your ignorance on the subject. That's
Yes.
really great. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, if they want to learn more about you or System Hub or any of that, I'm guessing that they can pick up your book,
Yep.
but what else where can they find you? How can they learn more?
If you're listening to this and because you like audio, the good thing is the book also has an audio version. Keep an eye out mid-year. I've got my next book coming out called Systems Champion, and it's written for the team member that will do this. Systemology is written for the business owner. Systems Champion will be for the team member doing it. So that's always a great place to start. Or you can just go to systemology.com and then that will link through to System Hub and the YouTube channel and the podcast. And there's a great little training in there. It's just the free training in the right hand corner. It just gets you started. Like, this is my jam. I absolutely love this stuff. I love the impact that we have. And I try and over deliver and just try and go more well and above just to get you going. Whether you choose systemology or not, I just want you to get systems. I'm hoping you listen to this and I've lit the fire in you for systems because they are transformative for you personally and for your business. You've got to do this.
I would echo that. I think all of us have been to a restaurant where they have systems and those that
Yeah.
don't. And I'm not just talking about McDonald's with Michael Gerber, and that was the McDonald's franchise model that Michael Gerber used. But the point is, there are excellent restaurants who have used systems, and you go in and you feel it. It's consistent every single time. They ask you the same question, and the food is amazing. And so, how different would this world be if even 30% of businesses used systems instead of just this ad hoc make it up as you go along? Everything is scattered here and there. So I really hope that your movement can catch on and be really great. So Dave, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I look forward to maybe connecting again in the future.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. Thanks for that, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Dave.